Hello, my name is Michael Czinkota, and today, again with my colleague, Charles Skuba, another professor at Georgetown University, I welcome you to our segment on thoughts on international business, marketing, and strategy. And today we're going to talk about the President Obama's pronouncement that he wants to double U.S. exports within 5 years, and we want to put some realism behind that. So today's topic, doubling U.S. exports in 5 years. Let me start out by portraying my bias right away. I think the goal is too small. It's not enough. It's insufficient. If I think back, the announcement of President Kennedy saying we want to put a man on the moon, doubling of exports is not the man on the moon. What we need is a serious line of thought. How do we triple U.S. exports? We have to reach here, and we have to set big goals for a big country and for big businesses, but also for small businesses. Let us really go after a vast increase in U.S. exports. And here's the reason why I say that. I've looked at some of the numbers. Actually, both of us looked at the numbers. And it turns out, not a great surprise, that the U.S. grossly under-exports. If we compare ourselves to other countries, for example, Australia exports on a per capita basis $7,580 every year per man, woman, and child. In the U.S., it's $3,240. So that's less than half than Australia. Come on, we can do better than that. I'm going to look also at imports, but first let me turn it over to my colleague, Professor Skuba. Welcome again.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It's a very, very important subject. I might disagree with Michael on the notion of, is the goal correct? I don't disagree with him in principle because, indeed, we need to pay attention. The United States does grossly under-export. Other countries, such as Australia, but the Canadians, the French, the Germans, certainly the Japanese, and certainly the Chinese, pay much more attention to building their exports than we do. I would say, though, that the question is not so much, is this a good goal, as is it an achievable goal? And I think doubling exports is probably more realistic and achievable, although I don't know if we have the right tools and policies in place to even achieve that. We should certainly have a goal of doubling our exports. But I should say that there was some good news last week that President Obama, in his recess appointments, did appoint Frank Sanchez as Undersecretary for International Trade in the Department of Commerce. So we finally do have a person directly responsible for the goal of doubling exports in office. He was sworn in this week. That's good news. It's lamentable that the Senate took so long to confirm Undersecretary Sanchez. I would say another thing that I'm concerned, certainly we have to move forward, and Undersecretary Sanchez will have his hands full in moving forward with bilateral free trade agreements with Colombia, with Panama, and with Korea. And he's very well suited to move us forward, particularly with Colombia and Panama, has good, rich experience in that area. But also, if we look at our third largest export market after our NAFTA partners of Canada and Mexico, China is our third largest export market. And I'm a little worried about increasing tensions with China. I believe we will pay attention to this in the future, but there's recent polls among American companies in Beijing that have felt that there's an increasing environment or disposition by the Chinese government that may run against American companies' interests. So if decisions related to commercial aircraft purchases, for example, go against American firms, that will severely disadvantage the United States in achieving this goal of doubling exports.
Well, I've got to say again, doubling is just not enough. And you know, in the context of imports, that's really how we have to look at exports. Not only does the US grossly under-export, it also over-imports. We import way more than we export, which is what gives us the trade deficit. And here, let's put our cards on the table. The realistic situation is, as long as we continue to do that, we are going to accumulate debt abroad, and it's simply a question of standard of living and, of course, quality of life. We have to export enough to pay for our imports, and we should actually have a surplus. That would be the right situation. And if we don't do that, at someday the chickens will come home to roost. And it means either lower currency value, or it means recession, ongoing recession. And both of these options mean standard of living very negatively affected. So this is really, we've got to in some ways become more Japanese, where Michiko is holding little Hakahiro and goes, export little boy, export little boy. and at earliest age already do they become trained to think about international issues.
Well, you're right, Michael. International markets are critical to the U.S., and United States consumption can no longer be the sole driver, not sole, but principal driver of world economic prosperity. We need to look to other markets, and we see good emerging signs in markets like China and India, that as consumption increases there alongside of purchasing power and economic growth, that these markets may indeed be good sources of business for U.S. companies. We have to look to those markets to drive our export growth in the future. And the United States consumer needs to save a little bit more and be more concerned about our fiscal health long term.
And one thing also to keep in mind, export policy to a large degree is driven by the jobs exports create. And especially now with 10% open unemployment, we need to create jobs. The trouble is, exports don't create as many jobs as they used to. For example, in the 1980s, the magic number bandied about was $1 billion worth of exports creates 17,000 jobs. In the 1990s, people were talking about $1 billion worth of exports creates 11,000 jobs. Now President Obama has spoken early March, explaining that the latest indications are $1 billion create 6,000 jobs. So if we want to achieve this job creation effect, we need to really boost our exports because the ratio has changed. We become more efficient, we become more productive. So the news isn't bad, but it still means every $1 billion worth of exports does not create the same number of jobs as it did before. Well, our magic hour has again come. Charlie, any concluding remarks on your end?
Well, just one concluding remark in relation to the increased productivity of American business. You're absolutely right. I think we're employing more robots than ever before, but American workers need good jobs. And the source of many of those good jobs are going to come from small and medium-sized enterprises. We need to build our exporting base among small and medium-sized businesses.
Absolutely. That is where a lot of growth will come from. And you should know that we're working on new segments to cover in the near future. For example, we're looking principally under the leadership of Professor Skuba at the issue of Google and China, which, as you know, in terms of censorship, in terms of national sovereignty, plays a very big role. We're also looking at export controls and how those affect U.S. exports and U.S. national security. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.